a few things that I'm still wrestling with. So I've timed it so that there's plenty of time for discussion. But anyway, so we'll get to that. And thank you again for coming and for this opportunity. Just a quick acknowledgement. This funding is made possible by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and my many thanks to Tony McHenry for his supervision and Cass for hosting my research. So thank you for that. Okay, so moving to the topic at hand. The way that I've organized it is in the following sections. I'm going to talk a bit about the background of the IB, because although a lot of people are somewhat familiar with it, there's quite a bit about it that people don't necessarily know. So I'll try and not drown you in information, but just provide you with enough context so the rest of it can make sense. So a bit of background, why the IB is an important topic of study. What happened in 2020? Well, I'm sure we all know what happened in 2020, but I'll discuss it a little bit. Then the data, tools, and method that I'm using for this particular study, and some very preliminary results, and then hopefully some discussion. So I'll be very grateful for any suggestions or questions of clarification or things like that that you might have, because this is, as I say, very much at the hammering through the ideas stage. And so this is the first time I'm actually, this opportunity is terrific, because this is my first time to get to try to get things out of my head and onto someone else's outside over there. So, okay, so what is the IB? At its simplest definitional level, it's a brand of educational programs for students aged 3 to 19. So that's what it is. And it was officially created in 1968. And I say officially because there's contested histories as to when exactly it was developed. So depending on who you read, but the official explanation is that it was developed in 1968. And so in 2018, it marked 50 years, right? So 2020, right now it's in 52 years. So not that old as such, but anyway, that's something we'll talk about later. It was originally developed for university admission. And so this was for students who were in the diplomatic world. Their parents were diplomats and what have you. And so they moved around from one country to another and needed a portable curriculum that they could take with them and not be constantly having to start anew. The thought was that this put them at a disadvantage for university admission when they eventually were applying in their home country. So anyway, so this was the idea behind its development, and it's offered in schools around the world as a result. So, oh, sorry, wrong way. Okay. Over its 50-year history, it's grown into 4 programs. So initially in 1968, there was only the diploma program. So this was aged 16 to 19. And then 25 years later came the middle years program. So an important aspect is that the IB was only one program for about 25 years and was constantly called the IB. There was never any distinguishing feature to it because there was only the one program. 1994 middle years program, 1997 primary years program. So again, this is ages 3 to 12. So they are going younger. And then in 2012, the final program, which is the careers related program for again 16 to 19. This was developed for students who are not necessarily planning on an academic sort of university career. It's more vocational. And so this was the last program. So as a result of all of these different programs, there's a proliferation of acronyms, right? So you've got IBDP, IBMYP, IBPYP, IBCP. And so, of course, it's very confusing. And so the organization at the time used to be called the IBO, so yet another acronym. And at some point, all of these were sort of consolidated into the IB. So most of the references since then, I think this would happen in about 2007. It's always the IB, the International Baccalaureate, and this could refer to the organization. It could refer to any one of these curricula, whether it's primary or diploma or what have you. So whilst simplifying was the intent, you can imagine that in descriptions and talks about it, or when it's being referred, it's very, very muddied. When people are talking about the IB, it's not very evident from what they're saying which one they're referring to. So this becomes a very interesting sort of discourse, referential kind of thing, which every time you hear the word IB, it's necessary to check the context and determine which of it is being discussed and things like that. So that has been part of my overall sort of research. The one that the one that I'm focusing on for this particular study is going to be just the diploma program. So that's the only one that is going to be relevant for our purposes for today. But it's a very important context in that sense. Okay, so moving on to give you a sense of how widespread or large this particular organization is. In 1972, there were only 22 schools in 14 countries. And now, of course, 2021, we've got over 5,000 schools in 158 countries. And as their website says, more than 1.4 million students. So it's quite extensive. And the pie chart can show you sort of where the dominance lies. So in the Americas, that's where the greatest number are. I've broken down the numbers by country a little bit more to give you an idea. So here we have the top 10 countries as of February the 16th, so fairly recent. And this is all information that I have taken from their website. So it's as current as they have it up there. So as you can see, the top two countries, United States and Canada. So the dominance is definitely in the North American side. And then China, and this includes Hong Kong and Macau, Ecuador, Australia, India, Spain, the UK, Mexico, and Japan. So it's the top 10 countries with the most IB schools in the world. It's quite diverse. And, so it's not just in a sort of private school niche either. What you can see from the table as well is that a large number of schools are publicly funded. So this is the IB being presented in the context of national curricula, right? So in Canada, for instance, it's being offered not predominantly, in fact, not as a private sort of choice for wealthy parents or an elite sort of program or anything like that. It's in the public schools and part of the provincial curricular offerings, and the same in the US, and also quite a significant number in the UK and Australia. The only place you can see where it's mostly private is India and Mexico. Ecuador was a surprise. Ecuador's public, that's a fairly recent phenomenon, I think probably about maybe 2014, if I remember correctly, something like that, where the government changed and then they decided to offer the IB sort of to everyone because remember, the understanding in all of these is that the IB has something to offer that goes beyond whatever the national curricula is. And the comparison tends always to be that the national curriculum is somehow deficient and that the IB is fulfilling whatever is deficient. And this makes this sort of range of countries very interesting because the IB seems to be able to satisfy everyone, no matter where you are, no matter what political stripe or financial or economic or social, and in fact, even faith-based, right? So the IB tends to be the curriculum of choice for Catholic schools, certainly very popular in Catholic schools here in Ontario, but also in Islamic schools, Confucian, Jewish. It's across a broad spectrum. So it's very interesting in how it's able to fulfill all of these diverse kinds of requirements. So in terms of it, so such a vast sort of organization has an equally vast organizational structure, huge sort of broad offices, 3 global centers spread out in The Hague and in the US and Singapore, foundation office in Geneva, assessment center in Cardiff, and then 3 regional offices really to match the regions that we saw earlier in the pie chart. But what I just want to draw attention to is the Association of IB World Schools. And this is the local sort of representation of the IB. So every sort of, in the UK, there's one, and in Canada, we have it by province. So BC has one and Ontario has one. And so what these associations do, they're a collection of the local schools that are offering the program. And so they unite in this association. What the association does here, for example, in Ontario, is it liaises between universities and schools and boards of education, parents and things like that, and the government. So it's a very influential body, and yet it only is known about within the IB world. So not, you know, so my neighbors down the road who are taxpayers or whatever won't know that there is such an organization and that this curriculum is existing in our local schools and things like that. So this is how the vastness of the organization then gets translated in the local setting in each case. Okay, so let's just move on to, so what makes the IB an interesting and important topic of study? It's one of the things about it, and one of the things that tends to be hidden in all of its vastness and also very tailored to particular things. It intersects a lot of different domains. So as I've just touched on, you know, universities and schools, we've already talked about the education levels. So we've got the K to 12, so that's kindergarten to grade 12, ages 3 to 19. So that's a student's sort of entire schooling life, right? At least until secondary. Then post-secondary, you've got university admissions. So the IB doesn't only impact university admissions, but it also is equated here in North America, especially, to first-year university. So people who are who have the IB diploma are then admitted to university in second year, assuming that the first year they've already completed in high school. And this is another area of great interest and requires more time than we have. Teacher training is another thing. So that's now, we're talking about beyond university. So presumably, if we take, again, I'll use Ontario as an example because it's the one that I'm most familiar with in this context. In order to teach at any of our Ontario public schools, you have to have a Bachelor of Education, right? So that's the 4-year degree. So Bachelor of Education, after which you then get certified by you have to do a Bachelor, the Bachelor of Education is a further 2 years of training and whatnot to get you into the professional sort of teaching category. What the IB does is says to the Ontario qualified teachers is that you're not qualified to teach in an IB school, you need to be IB certified. So in terms of its impact now, we're looking at even beyond the university level. So a lot of different levels in which it has an influence. So that's one, right? That's the education aspect of it. Its global reach is fairly obvious, as we discussed already. It's widespread, a lot of countries. And one of the first things you see when you go to its website is that it says, you know, the IB is offered in more than 5,000 schools and in more than 150 countries around the world and things like that. And also that particular aspect of its description is a recurring discourse pattern. So in previous studies, it's been identified as one of the things that tends to be repeated often to give it this global image, which then tends to mask that the dominance is in North America and that kind of thing. So it's an important aspect of its identity, I suppose. The other thing is the powerful and influential network. So it's got loads of partnerships and alliances. Not just, okay, so if we go to the website again, right away, there's a section for government. And so because it's trying to offer itself as an alternative to national curricula, it needs to be in communication with governments, right, and discuss things at the level of national and state level kinds of educational offerings. So that's one of the sort of powerful influences that it has. And the other is, you know, it's got it deals with universities, admissions policies, transfer credits, things like that. NGOs is another international kind of partnership that it has. So it's connected with some very powerful and influential people, one of whom, of course, is the Aga Khan, in a network of Aga Khan schools around the world. And so Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, is a former IB person. He doesn't go around promoting it or anything, but whenever it's useful, or it depends, you know, when our Governor General recently, there was an interesting story about her. She was also an IB person. And so the IB makes the news then when these important people, Prince Charles has had a lot to do with it in terms of representation or speaking, may have referred to it or something like that. So things like that. So it hangs out with the higher upper echelon, powerful people. Okay. Again, just to remind you that so that's just the background and what the organization is about. What we're interested in is in the IB diploma. Okay, so what happened in 2020? We're just looking at the IB diploma. What happened in 2020? COVID-19 happened, as we all know. And so schools around the world scrambled, shut down. And as a result, examinations around everywhere had to be canceled, or alternative forms of assessment had to be made up or come up with, I guess. So in March, so this is fairly early, right? March last year, the IB announced for the first time in its history, so unprecedented definitely applies here. They used it as well. In March, they announced that they were canceling their May exams. So they have May exams, which are around the world, and these are the ones that are important for university admission, right? So people who are doing their IB diploma, they are now taking their exams in May in time for fall university admission. So the exams are canceled. So what happens in lieu of the exams? Well, they've come up with an alternate assessment form, which involved some sort of algorithm, which they didn't really explain what it was. But what they said on their later explanation on their website was that they would be able to predict how the students would have done had they taken the exam, and if there had been no COVID-19. So there were a lot of sort of ifs and basically different sorts of variables. Needless to say, it was a disaster, but that wasn't made evident before the congratulatory results messages that were published in July. July the 6th was results day for the IB. So again, another thing that will become, and we'll talk about this, it's more than a month prior to the A-level results and just about a month before the Scottish results, which became relevant later on. So this message was splashed on the IB website, the IB Twitter feeds, the Instagrams and whatnot. Congratulations to the class of 2020. There were messages from the Director General, who is at the top of that's the head of the IB organization, Deputy Director General, Assessment Officer, representatives of all the IB schools. Congratulations to the class of 2020 for doing such a terrific job in such difficult circumstances. But what was going on the very day that this announcement was issued, this petition went online. And this petition was a reaction by the students who received their grades and discovered that their grades were very much lower than they had expected. And as a result, now their admissions offers to universities were in jeopardy. They were now going to lose scholarships, not get into med school, not be able to do whatever it was that they had spent the last 2 years, which is what the IB diploma is based on, trying for. So this is what the petition is: Justice for May 2020 IB graduates, build a better future. Build a better future is sort of a play on the IB slogan on their website, which is education for a better world. So build a better future, and then hashtag IB scandal. And this is where my title and my particular study is absolutely focused on, is this scandal. Okay, so this particular Twitter hashtag. So why look at this hashtag? Because just by the very hashtag IB scandal, we can assume several things. One, that it's not going to be something that's going to be very praising of the IB. And secondly, chances are that with a hashtag IB scandal, the people who are going to be posting are going to be angry students or just generally angry people. And it's just going to be all about anger. And that's what I had expected. So when I first started to follow it, I was just thinking, well, this is really entertaining to see, because the IB, I have to contextualize that actually, because the IB tends to predominantly be in positive references. It's always better than everything. It's superior. It's always the gold standard and things like that. So to see it in a context that's so uniquely different from its usual context was entertaining, I say, because I research IB discourse. So entertaining in that sense. I don't mean to belittle the impact of this. As it turned out, students, the people who were posting or this particular hashtag became a key source of information for all people: students, parents, teachers, journalists. Journalists, in fact, were actually posting there, inviting students who didn't have any other alternative to contact them, so that the journalists would be able to act on their behalf. Researchers, a professor from a university in New York, solicited students to contact her because she researches the unfairness of algorithms and things like this, right? So this particular hashtag became a really important resource for all sorts of people posting and all sorts of people posting, but also sharing key information, which was not available in other parts, in other places. So I was looking at newspapers. I was checking newspapers reports and things like this. Things were not in Canada to date. There has been no report on this at all. Well, to clarify, there was one report. We have a syndicated press, so usually when there's a report, it gets into about 25 newspapers all at once. This one was only in one paper, and it was a repeat of a New York article about the algorithm, but there's no Canadian news story. And remember, as we had said before, Canada is one of the high users of IB. So this was a very important hashtag and a very important source of information for me as well, to see what was happening and what developments were going on a day-by-day basis, right? So just to give you an idea of my data set then, so I have two data sets. One is the Twitter, this hashtag IB scandal. So all tweets containing the hashtag, only original tweets, and the corpus is fairly small. It's got 4,278 tweets with over 100,000 words. Newspapers, I used because I'm working with IB Discourse, I have a sampling frame for downloading newspapers from LexisNexis. And I downloaded all articles with the search term International Baccalaureate. So the difference between these two data sets is important because one is actually, it's arising out of the scandal, right? So it's all about the scandal and nothing else. Whereas the newspaper corpus is general. It's going to contain articles that may or may not have anything to do with results. So they're quite different in that sense. I mean, we already have a difference existing in terms of Twitter data sets and newspaper data sets because of their hashtags and what have you. So there's already that difference, but this is an additional kind of difference as well that needs to be borne in mind. So just a quick breakdown. The newspaper corpus in terms of numbers of articles, right? So the newspaper corpus, 289 articles over the same 2-month period. So I'm just looking at July the 6th when the results were published to September the 7th. So that's exactly 2 months of information. And you can see the breakdown here by region. And I put it by region because we had just discussed regions in which the IB is. So I thought regions, Nexus provides this information. And so I just used this. But what I found interesting is that North America is not the highest. Generally speaking, in my previous experience with IB Discourse, it's dominated by North American news about the IB, which is not surprising given that it's dominant here. But interestingly, there seems to be not as much interest or not as much reporting, I should say, on the IB during this 2-month period than in other parts, particularly Europe, which of course, particularly the UK. So that's that breakdown. If we compare more specifically by month, so July 6th to 31, there's 138 newspaper articles to over 2,000 tweets, and August 1 to 31, fewer tweets, but quite a number still. And then just the first week of September, which things are still happening. Interestingly, the languages, so when I was collecting the tweets, there are tweets in all languages, but of course I have excluded those. I'm only using English Twitter data, but it was interesting to see the sorts of languages that there were, Catalan, Dutch, Finnish, French, German, and so on. And then the newspaper articles, when again, my newspaper corpus is also only English, but I just looked at the other languages that were also available with the International Baccalaureate search term, and these were the languages. So moving on to tools, because my data set is so small, suddenly I had a cornucopia of corpus tools at my disposal. And so which one? And I love them all because each one can do something different, right? So Sketch Engine with larger corpora, and Lancsbox with data visualization, and AntConc, which is my first love. When I first met corpus linguistics, it was through AntConc, so it's always got a special place in my heart. So I tried different things for different purposes, and I will show you some results. I've used AntConc for my Twitter data because I preferred to have something that didn't have any part of speech tagging or anything. It was an untagged corpus because of all the different features of the Twitter data. But I also use Sketch Engine for a keyword comparison with a larger corpus. So I'll come to that in a moment. Preliminary, again, remember this is very much a work in progress. So these are at first blush kind of preliminary results. So this is the Twitter data. Now, I initially compared the Twitter corpus data to the newspaper data set to get to get differences between the two sets of data to describe or to characterize their differences. But when I ran word lists of most frequent words for each one, they were quite similar. But the advantage of the word list was that it also showed similar words, not just differences, right? So keywords, of course, is going to say what's unusually frequent in this one compared to this one. And so eliminated the overlap. And I found that the word lists were more helpful or more showed more. So these are the 20 most frequent lexical words using AntConc word list tool. Okay, so you can see that we've got, these are the top 20, and I broke it down by types. So, okay, there. Yeah, so we've got hashtags, IB scandal, of course, no surprise there, IB results, and then machine learning, interestingly. So hashtag machine learning is one of the most frequent words, frequent hashtags. Mentions, we've got IB organization. So at IB organization is the official Twitter platform for the organization, of course. So at IB organization, at IB Scandal Global, this is a different one. It's a group of students that have come together and eventually then became a class action lawsuit in the works. Something like that is going on over there. What we've also got is newspapers. Interestingly, they're very UK newspapers, right? So you've got Test, Guardian, Financial Times, Telegraph. And then the final one is Dwight School, which is an elite private school, which has campuses in New York and London and Seoul and various other parts. So that's also an interesting sort of frequent word there. In terms of content, you've got IB, students, grades, results, grading, and algorithm. So these are the main concerns in this particular data set and will require further investigation. And then the words that were a combination. So they could be mentions, they could be hashtags, and they can be content. And these were IBO, which is the organization, Siva Kumari, the Director General of the organization, who has quietly left the organization as of October the 22nd, but you'll not find any reporting of it anywhere. And incidentally, also the Chief Assessment Officer, who is also quietly left, and there's no mention of it anywhere. Anywhere except on hashtag IB Scandal, which is again why this particular hashtag IB Scandal has become the place to go for any kinds of news that relates to the organization. And again, Ofqual. Ofqual is the UK government body that oversees regulations of assessment and things like that. So that's again, so this gives us a sense of where the concerns are coming from. Moving quickly, I see I'm just taking up way too much time. Okay. The 20 most frequent lexical words in the newspaper corpus. The highlighted ones are the shared, right? So this is the students' IB results and grades are frequent in both the newspaper data and in the Twitter data. And other words, of course, they're not that surprising. You would expect that with the search term International Baccalaureate, you would have a frequent word such as number 8, which is international, and number 12, which is baccalaureate. You would have things about schools and education and university, because it's to do with university admission in terms of this 2-month period, diploma level, and things like that. So this is not that surprising, but it is interesting to see the shared, so that the in the next steps, the idea is going to be to look at the shared words. Oh, and I haven't mentioned, I have forgotten to mention, sorry about that, that at this time, whilst the Twitter is, the hashtag IB scandal is going at top speed, the press is kind of meandering along. What's happening on the IB Twitter feed? Well, during this 2-month period, at IB organization had a total of 35 tweets over this 2-month period, and IBDP, which is the IB diploma program, had a total of 12. So not a whole lot of stuff is going on the official channels. Okay, so in order to see how the 2020 newspaper data set compared to a larger corpus of general IB references. So remember, my larger study, I have a very large, over 23 million word corpus, global corpus of International Baccalaureate. And so I took my 2-month corpus and compared it with this larger reference corpus to see what characterizes this newspaper data from general, sort of the last 50 years of general. Well, no surprise, eh? COVID-19, pandemic, coronavirus, but algorithm, right? So there is some mention within this newspaper data of algorithm stuff. I can wager that it's not going to be so much about the IB, but probably more about A-levels and the Scotland results. Lockdown, in-person distancing, U-turn. U-turn is what happened when the A-level results were announced, right? So that happened August the 13th. The government of the UK first said, no, it's all very fair, and then later did a U-turn. And of course, the IB students were incensed because no one was doing a U-turn for them, unfortunately. Quarantine, cancel. Here's one, IB-CP. So IB wasn't part of the result. It was just CP, and then it was through concordancing, of course, that I discovered that it's really the careers program, which is the vocational, not the diploma program. So probably no connection to university admission. So it's curious that that is the one that is a key word there. Off-qual again, kids with a double S is an elite sort of school, I think, in Pakistan. Downgrade, IAs is IB related, mask, statistical, again, algorithm, Pakistani, hybrid, and unfairness. So these are the keywords, very interesting, buried amidst all the COVID stuff. So that was very interesting to see. And okay, moving on to next steps. So next steps is going to require detailed analysis of all of these sort of, at first blush, sort of interesting findings, looking at how Twitter and newspaper, they're clearly talking about the IB. How are they talking about the IB in different ways? What voices dominate? Because the hashtag IB scandal is very interesting in terms of the voices that are all congregated over there. So it's such a huge variety. And then what about the silences? Now the silences in Canada, for example, but other silences such as key personnel, key IB personnel that have sort of quietly disappeared, and you only discover it through this hashtag. These sorts of silences, I'm not really sure what happens with that yet. And I'll just like to end with a final word with one of the quotations that 1 month later in August, August the 7th, this is what happened. This is how someone has said when the Scotland U-turn, or not Scotland, but when Scotland was apologizing for its grades. And this is what this person said. Each time I see such press articles, there is only one thought that comes to mind. Where were all these voices when the stepchildren i.e. IB students, got screwed over. We were literally begging the likes of BBC and Telegraph to mention the IB scandal. And this is August the 7th, 2020. So what's really interesting about this is up until now, IB students and everything IB has always been privileged, sort of the elite who are at the front of the line. You know, when it comes to university admission, they are the cream of the crop and they're always being sought after. And here now, as a result of what's happened, they are now the voiceless minority. They have become the ones that are at the end of the queue, the ones that no one is talking about. They are the marginalized and disenfranchised. And this whole discursive shift in terms of what the IB students are is absolutely, it's gripped me like nothing else. So anyway, I'll end on that note. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope I didn't babble away too much, but thanks very much. And I love your questions and comments. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think we can all agree that that was a really interesting talk about something that maybe not all of us may have thought about during everything that's been going on with COVID. But yes, I would like to invite any questions or comments now, either in the chat, or please do feel free to use the raise hand function. Just in the meantime, while we're waiting, I did actually have a question.
Thank you.
Did you feel like the anger was more directed at the people behind the IB, or was it more like foregrounding the algorithm, did you feel?
That is such a great question, because that's one of the things. So change over time, right? So as this was unfolding day by day, and I was following it day by day, I noticed that there was definitely shifts in the way that things were being positioned. So in the first initial week or so, it was all about me and my grades. First, it's like the shock, right? So I've always expected, you know, getting this much, and now I've got, you know, 10 points lower or something like that. And so there's a lot of posts about, yes, that happened to me too. Me, you know, now my university admission. So a lot of focus on individual sorts of grades and stuff. And then that sort of shifted to sort of betrayal because the organization was not stepping in, right? So then it shifts to, the IB should demonstrate that its own values. You know, it's always preaching that we should be caring and empathetic, and why doesn't it look for its, you know, to behave the way that it's always telling us to behave, kind of, right? So it's the organization in general. And then it becomes more personal as time goes by, because the organization is completely silent and not responding to anything. And so then it becomes personal attacks. So it's things like, you know, hashtag Siva Kumari has to resign, or hashtag Siva Kumari, or whoever the chief assessment, Paula Wilcock was the assessment officer, you know, why doesn't she say something? And so there became more personal attacks. And then ultimately at the end of my data set, in any case, because that hashtag is very much alive, and it started up again just last month with, again, more sort of conversation going on over there. But at the end of my data set, the students end with kind of almost resignation and kind of disillusionment, and really, what are we going to do now? You know, because now the universities have taken away our offers, our lives are ruined, basically. And so then they shift to making videos and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely shifts in the discourse. It's very interesting how that goes. Yeah, thank you for that.
There is also another question in the chat from Gloriana asking for a bit of a clarification. She asked, do students who are enrolled in the IB program only pursue this degree, or is it in parallel to a standard degree from the country where they go to school from?
Yeah, thank you for that, Gloriana. Yeah, this is really interesting. It depends. It depends where you are. So usually, general rule of thumb is that it is an optional. So let's take Canada for an example, right? So our education system is provincial, and you need a provincial high school diploma in order to get to university. In certain provinces in Canada, the IB can be used in lieu of that. So you can use the IB diploma. If you choose to use the IB diploma as your final high school qualification, then you're kind of given the provincial one to accompany it. But it's your choice, right? Like you have to do a high school diploma. You have to do the provincial one. It has to be recognized by the province if you're doing IB. In some provinces, you can't. You can do IB, but you still have to do the provincial. So it really depends on the arrangements that the IB organization has come to with the government or the governing bodies. One very interesting researcher in Israel who's doing research on the IB, she has discovered that the IB is trying to address this. They call it lack of fairness. They are now saying that they're struggling to be recognized in countries where the national curriculum supersedes the IB, and so they're trying to persuade governments that the IB is equal to national curricula and should be recognized as such. So that's a conversation that's taking place as well. But it really depends, I suppose, is the answer, depending on the country and the context. But generally a choice.
Okay, that's interesting. Just got a question in from Tony McHenry. You said your first love was Anconk. Amongst the new tools you've used, what is your new favorite and why?
Excellent. Hi, Tony. New tools. Okay, so I love Sketch Engine. And again, this is familiarity, right? So I have Anconk can handle smaller data sets, which is why it was wonderful to be able to go back to Anconk again. But Sketch Engine is brilliant because it can handle large data sets, which is what I need for my larger study, which is more than 23 million words. But Sketch Engine does wonderful things, right? So it automatically part of speech tags, which is wonderful for word sketches. So being able to run a word sketch it's almost become like, I don't know, you spend months. I mean, I spent almost ridiculous, really, almost 9 months creating my corpus. It took so long to make it, to put it in a format that I could actually use it. So once I've got all this giant one, then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to put it onto Sketch Engine and run a word sketch and see what I can see. Like, what can it show me? Because I can't seem to understand what I have without first having the broad brush view of it. And the other tool, Lanxbox. Now, Lanxbox and I are on sort of acquaintance, kind of really trying to go to the next stage, because I mentored on the MOOC, and Lanxbox has, oh my goodness, brilliant features, so the graph call tool is wonderful, and Wizard is totally Wizard because it can do all sorts of things for you. But because it's newer to me, I'm a very slow learner. So in order to learn something, I really need to invest more time in it. So it's got features that others don't, and it also handles a larger number of formats. So for instance, Lanxbox can handle RTF, no problem. Sketch Engine cannot. It's in fact the only one that it can't, right? So things like that. So there's each tool does different things. Sorry for rambling. I hope that answered that.
We do have a couple more questions. So Paul Rayson has come in and has thanked you for the talk, said it was interesting. He said, would you be able to look at more regional differences by making and comparing subcorpora from each region, or depending on where the newspaper article is from, or location of the Twitter user, and then asking you if you could bring the analysis of languages other than English?
Yeah. That would be great. In terms of regional, I think that's very interesting. Yes, that would be something. Right now, the way I've got my corpus split up is by day, right? So this is the Twitter corpus. I've got it split by day. Just because what I wanted to do was to do a keyword analysis of the Twitter data in terms of what was happening each day to discover a way of splitting the corpus for more general keywords rather than just arbitrarily say, I'm going to look at 1 week by 1 week by 1 week. I thought if I can find a natural breaking point or a natural shift, that's what I would do. But in terms of regional, I'm not really sure how that would work, but that would be really interesting because right now I'm only guessing in terms of what they're saying, whether it's UK, there's Norway. See, Norway, the Norwegian government stepped in. So there's a lot of Norway, Finland, there's also Germany, and they're chiming in. But these are done in English. So the Norway ones were in Norwegian, of course. So there were quite a lot of those. I'm not sure how I would do non-English. That would be something that I would certainly have to consider, but that's a great, that would be terrific. Like regional differences and languages too would be terrific. Thank you for that. Yes.
We do have another question in chat. It's from Maggie Mee. She says she also thanks you for the talk. She was just wondering if there was a connection between the UK and this scandal. Do you think that this was linked to what was happening in the UK, probably regarding A-level results? And did what was happening in the UK at the same time shape the discourse in any way? So the link, mainly from what I can discern, the link between the A-level scandal and the IB scandal.
Absolutely. So the only thing is, and this is the other thing that becomes evident in the Twitter, the scandal thread, is that when A-level results were published, that was August the 13th. And so then the IB students are really annoyed because now all the press, so there's enormous press coverage about, well, first there was the Scottish results and then Scotland apologizing and saying that we'll just get rid of the algorithm results and go elsewhere. Then the A-level U-turn. And so by this point, the IB students have had nothing but a wall of silence from their organization, right? So July 6th is when the IB results were published and IB scandal went live. So that's July the 6th. August the 13th is when A-level results were published, right? So that's quite a bit of time. So then the IB students are saying things like, we were the first ones. People are now talking about an unfair algorithm. They've come really late to the party. Were they sleeping? Why is no one listening to us, the IB students? We were here first. So shaping the discourse, absolutely. It totally was, yes, and very much linked to A-level and Scottish results for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I am getting slightly conscious of time, so probably last 1 or 2 questions. Please, again, just a reminder, do feel free to use the hands up function if you prefer.
I think 2 people have their hand up.
Gloriani, you're very choppy.
Yeah.
We do have another quick question though in chat, and we do also have hands up. I will just do the one in chat first, just because that's the one I saw first. Oh, 2 people had their hand up. That's interesting. I've only just been able to see that. Apologies, Johnny. Would you like to ask your question then?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I know Teams can be a bit glitchy, much like the IB algorithm. I should say as well, just so that nobody accuses me of anything, like Justin Trudeau, I'm one of that shadowy cabal of IB graduates a long time ago. And thank you for your talk. That was really fascinating. And I was sort of reflecting on my own experience while I was listening to you and thinking about how we as students sort of related to the examiners and the organization as a whole. And they seemed very, very distant, very invisible, very unaccountable in a way. even though in my year we sort of were one of the years that piloted the middle years program, so we maybe got a bit more sort of discourse on the IB than many students. But I wonder, so my question is then, I suppose that there's something about this story and how this scandal unfolded that I feel is very very much related to the kind of the way that public figures and institutions relate to the users or sort of ordinary members of the public who are connected to those institutions. So it seems to me there's a lot about kind of the social media dynamics of this, of how the scandal was kind of talked about on social media. And that to me seems very different from the sort of pre-social media age. So do you think that, you know, a lot of this maybe is to do with how people use social media to challenge institutions and challenge authority? And in that sense, it's quite similar to people complaining about scandals in the food industry or in government or other sectors.
Oh, yes, that's a great point. Absolutely. Because you know what, within that, first of all, very nice to meet an IB person. I hope I didn't say anything that was offensive. Sorry about that.
Not at all.
In terms of the IB, the Twitter, the social media aspect, absolutely. Because a lot of the things that they initially started to talk about is things like, you know, please retweet this so that it can start trending. And if it starts trending, then the mainstream media will pick it up, right? So there's clear intent in terms of the way that this is supposed to work, because they're not going to be able to get anyone to pay attention in terms of their questions until, you know, it's like the safety numbers, or the more of us there are, the louder we will be. So there's definitely that, and that can only happen through this kind of medium. But and also the petition, you know, the online petition, sort of change.org and these things, to make a petition is not so onerous, I suppose. It's just trying to get the word out and stuff like that. So initially, I have to say honestly, when I first saw it, I was also of the mind that, okay, here's another sort of petition complaint, and IB students probably they didn't get the grades that they want, so now they're complaining. But as time went by, and they were completely being ignored, and I was more concerned because I'm sitting here in Canada. Canada is it's number 2 in terms of IB consumption. And nothing is being reported. It was like a blanket kind of silence that was so deafening that I thought, what is going on? I contacted newspapers, education reporters, universities, and said, there's this problem with grades going on. There's a huge global conversation going on. Shouldn't you be interested in this? And I never got any reply. I got a reply from one university who pointed me to, they said, you might be interested in looking at #IB scandal. And I said, okay, thank you. I'm already there, but no one in Canada is interested, and their lack of interest has interested me, right? And I thought, and then I started to actually, much to my surprise, really feel sorry for and pity and look out for the IB students who I used to before feel were terribly privileged, you know. So yeah, I mean, on the one, it may have started that way, but certainly it's using the affordances of that platform to get its voice heard. So yes, but thank you for that.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, there is one last question in chat, but I am cautious of time, so I am inclined to wrap it up here, because I realise now, with everything being online, ironically, people are busier than they were before with more commitments. But yes, thank you very much, everybody, for attending this UCREL talk. As I say, this will be uploaded onto our YouTube page. And if you are interested in hosting a talk yourself in future, then please contact either me or Gloriana. We do have some more talks this term, if my slides will cooperate. No, they won't. It's completely frozen. Okay, but we do have some more talks coming up for for the rest of this term that were very, very interesting. They are always at the same time. So they were always at 1 p.m. UK time on a Thursday. So please do keep an eye on our Twitter for future announcements. But yes, thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks a lot for your comments. Thank you. I guess I should stop presenting.